Okay, everything is live, including on YouTube and being recorded. And if there are any participants, they are able to attend and watch, but I don't see anybody there. So the first committee is planning and zoning, if we're okay to start with that.
Yes, it's fine.
Okay, manager's update is the same thing I've had on there for a while. And I just wanted mainly to remind everybody about the board vacancies. I did bring this up last week under ops and policy. But I wanted to let you know, we are starting to get some people in who are either requesting reappointment or looking for appointment to a position. So I will give you those names. Usually you approve that in February. I'll give you those at the committee meeting in February, so you're aware of that. We are looking for people in the zoning hearing board and planning commission. Mr. Erbaldinger.
I have a quick question about that Silversmith development. You said you will take it, you're moving it, but we saw the article in the Post Gazette you shared with us.
Right.
Do we have any updates beyond what's written in the article? Like, did they actually contact us to talk to us, or not?
I to be honest with you, I don't, maybe it's my age. I don't recall the fact that Action Housing was going to get a grant for anything there. I don't recall Action Housing coming to us with anything. Does anybody recall that?
I don't remember anything. Like, I mean,
I don't either. That's one reason why I made sure I sent that to you, because I don't recall either Silversmith or Action Housing talking to us. I just didn't know if they were talking to anybody else. So that was a surprise to me when I saw it. So thank God it's not my memory. That's what I wasn't sure about. I thought, what did I miss?
Should we contact them? What's going on? Do you want to talk to? I mean, technically they have to reach out to us anyway, but
right, they do, because of zoning issues and all that. I just didn't know if anybody else to talk to them. We can. Silversmith doesn't generally reply to me too much, but I can ask him too.
I would prefer to just ask Action Housing. I don't know.
Yeah, Joe Costa.
Joe Costa.
Mhm.
Let me make a note of that. I'll email you if I find anything out. That's all I have to report on, unless anybody else has a
I
question.
have a question. There's an item under sidewalk inspections. We did receive a report from McMahon Associates about the conditions of the sidewalks. And I guess the discussion we need to have is whether there is any zoning revision we want to make regarding the upgrade or care of sidewalks that are on private property. I know we get involved when trees are disrupting sidewalks, and we often find the borough has to get involved in repairing those if it's a borough tree. But I was wondering if there is any interest in looking at especially areas where there are gaps, where you can have a street going along and then suddenly there's no sidewalk, there's just grass. And alternatively, is there something we want to do about in places where it is a green swale on the edge, maintaining those for water containment purposes? I don't think we've ever really had a good discussion about the condition of the sidewalks as a part of our pedestrian facilitation issue. I know in my immediate neighborhood, there was a great deal of sidewalk repair done as a consequence of the gas company digging up all the pipes. I have not observed an increase in the use of the sidewalk. People still walk in the street by preference. And so I'm not sure, what the situation calls for here, but I thought we ought to, this has been on the agenda here for a while, and I thought we ought to do something to bring that to closure one way or another.
Well, let me just say that the reason why it's been on the agenda is more because of code enforcement than anything else, because this was a few years ago, and I was asked to keep it on there because periodically over the years, Dawn has gone out, especially during better weather, and notified people that they need to repair sidewalks. And that's maybe I should put that in there as more of an explanation. It wasn't intended to be anything more than that. That was the original reason why it was on here.
Yeah, but we did have a sidewalk review as part of our active transportation plan. And so we have new information now. Dawn, have you had any opinion about that? About, whether there are places where the sidewalks really should be under some sort of discussion for either repair, upgrade, or actually installation? Is this something you want to require on transfer of property, for example?
No, I have not, to be honest with you. I've had nothing to that effect.
I would like to entertain the thought, and I've seen some sidewalks at intersections that are kind of sticking along the road to a point where somebody can look up or down the road to see what's coming, because Ardmore is turning into a freeway. And if we don't have some kind of way for our people to see up and down Ardmore before they cross, I've already lost a neighbor behind that particular situation. So I don't know. Yeah, maybe Patty has something new to think about. I don't know how.
I'd like to consider a couple of things. I know, and maybe Steve Corwell has some advice on this. I know some communities have a requirement that you bring sidewalks up to a particular condition upon transfer of the property. And I think that might be something that we might want to entertain, because it could be put into the mortgage, if people can't pay for it any other way. It would be a way to, begin paying attention to upgrading our sidewalk situation systematically, especially if we're trying to encourage more transportation options. Having passable, good condition sidewalks is certainly a way to do that. Any other thoughts on that subject?
I want to add something, but not on the sidewalk specifically.
Yes, Marcus.
I think we agreed in the past that we do not want to force our residents to fix sidewalks. They have to be, if they're non-existing, we just leave it like that. If something is like a tripping hazard, then they have to fix it. But we don't want to build new sidewalks and force our residents to pay for it. I'm pretty sure we talked about that.
Even on transfer of property?
Yes, because it will make it more expensive. Like a sidewalk, I think even for like a house with, I don't know how wide, 20 feet or so, it's $40,000 or so. It was expensive. And we don't want to pay for it, and they shouldn't have to pay for it. And we didn't explicitly talk about transfer of properties, but it would make our houses, it would collapse, our housing market would collapse if we would force people to build a sidewalk whenever they buy a house.
Anybody else? I wanted to add something sort of related, but not directly. So let's finish the sidewalk thing first. Anyone else on sidewalks?
Yeah. I'd just like to add, I think the thing I noticed is a lot of those sidewalks were put in 50 years ago when we all had small local schools and the kids walked to school. They don't do that anymore. And from what I see in my area, even when there's sidewalks, including Glasgow, people still walk on the street. One of my concerns would be, aside from the cost of having to install a sidewalk on my property, is the nuisance of maintaining it. You have to have the snow cleared in 24 hours. And for older residents, that means you have to pay someone to come in and do it. And that's another burden, especially if it's really not getting used. So I would have some questions about that myself. Those are my thoughts.
Anybody else? I just want to add something that Mr. Burley had said then, sort of related. He was talking about Ardmore and walkways and speeding and being able to cross there. I meant to bring this up last week under public safety, but maybe since the mayor's here and other people are here, that makes sense to say it now before I forget. The corner of Lenox and Ardmore is a real problem. I don't know if anyone's noticed that before, but if you're coming down Lenox and you have to turn right onto Ardmore, people are parking on that yellow line right at the corner where the coffee shop used to be. I forget what's there now, but in any case, even if it's just a car, sometimes you can't see around them. And I've come down that way a number of times, and I've seen near accidents several times because I've gotten down to that intersection myself, and then you have to kind of inch out to make the right turn onto Ardmore. I don't know if there's anything we can do about that. There is a yellow line painted there, but that is a safety concern. I don't think there's been any accidents there so far. That'd be something for Chuck to tell you if he was on. But I wanted to mention that since I forgot to bring it up last week.
Did you bring it to the chief's attention yet?
Well, he's sort of aware of it, yes, but I didn't talk to him in any great detail about it, no.
So the two things that I'm noticing is, one, there needs to be stricter enforcement of the parking on the yellow line, which is issue number one. But issue number two is that that new business there doesn't also advise their customers, I believe it's now a hair cutting salon, that, hey, you can't park there. Now, I understand that we also put up a no parking sign, or at least that's what I saw. I thought I saw that a no parking sign was hung right there, but either way, it's, unless you look for it, because it's basically hanging off one of the light poles there. So I think we need to, number one, talk to the business, and number two, I think we just need to write a few tags and get the message across.
I'll mention it to Chuck then.
I'll mention it to Chuck as well. I just didn't know if you had brought it up to him since, because this just was, I was made aware of this, that it was a problem. Somebody pulled me aside on Saturday night to tell me about it. They were complaining about it. It was a resident who was complaining about the ability to make the turn from Lenox onto Ardmore.
Yeah,
So,
parking.
Especially if there's like, when I come down there quite often, whenever I go to the Borough building, and if there's like a large SUV park, you're pretty much blind. You kind of have to guess and like very slowly go in and hoping that people don't speed and crash into you. So I think enforcement, like talking to Chuck, is the right thing to do. But I think maybe plan B, if that doesn't work, we have to watch it, put a concrete planter, like some, some plants, like one of those round concrete planter, put it right there that no one can physically park there, right at the corner. But it should be our plan B. First, I think we should talk to Chuck. I agree.
I totally agree. I do a lot of traveling around in that area, and I use that intersection a lot. And I have to ease out there because when they come down Ardmore, a lot of times they don't realize that there is a right turn there, and they will not slow down. So I think something needs to be done to put more signage out there or something, because something's going to happen. Somebody's going to get hit. And it could be a pedestrian too, because they try to cross there. So I don't know what we can do. I just like everybody welcomes all suggestions to see what we can do about that, because that's going to turn into something that we don't want to hear about. We don't do something with it.
That's all I have to report, Bill. I don't have anything else.
Okay, sounds good. Well, Don, did you say anything to us yet?
No, Dawn has to report.
Yeah. Hello,
Don, yes.
you ready for me?
Yes, Don.
Okay, I'm sure last week you all know that we had a huge elm tree come down, did some damage to a rear deck and a roof up on 228 Woodside and also 140 Cherry Valley Road, which did severe damage to fences and so forth. Steve, can you pull that picture up for me, please?
Yeah. Okay. Everybody should see it, I think, now.
Okay. Okay, if you take a look at that picture, you'll see in the background that big elm tree laying on the guy's deck and part of his roof. And then the tree, that real skinny tree, comes up and bends around. Well, when it crashed, it took a lot of limbs and tree down from that area. That one tree that's bent, as you can see, is only being held by a thread. And I made an emergency phone call, which I got approval from Mr. Morse to take that tree down. And also, if you look to the right, to the far right, you'll see there's one that's severely leaning. That tree is ready to come down also. So we had a lot of conversation as to who owns the tree, this, that, and the other thing. So thanks to Barb Martin and Public Works, we found the pins. And unfortunately, the tree belongs to the Borough of Forest Hills. That came down on the gentleman's roof. So I just want to let you know what's going on there. All insurance companies have been notified. So, and I also alerted our arborist to come and cut that tree down, those two trees. The one, like I said, is just hanging by a thread.
Did you need to see the other picture too, Dawn? You gave me two.
No, they're both the same,
Okay,
Steve.
all right.
Yeah, I just took two just in case. And if you can look up to the top, if you look up where the ivy is on that one tree that's bent over, you'll see there's a broken limb there also. So that has to come down. So all we're going to do is just cut the trees and drop them. We're not going to haul them out and shred them. Any questions about that situation?
Dawn, may I speak, please?
Sure.
I did have an email from the resident on 140 Cherry Valley asking that these trees be taken down. So I'm glad that you already have looked into that.
Right.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. The other thing that I have is that we have some conversation. I know the trees coming down at 700 Lenox Avenue, that has been decided by council to remove that tree. But I'm concerned about the concrete work that has to be done to the resident that has the tree, the sidewalk, and the neighbor's tree or concrete next door. I talked with Public Works. It's too large of a job for them to do. They cannot do that job. So I'd like to know what our next move might be as far as the concrete work goes.
Dawn, you had said Carl's was able to do the work. Did you know that for sure? And are they?
Yeah, that's
qualified for
correct. In fact, I think that council has seen the estimate, if I'm not mistaken.
it? Yeah,
We have, Dawn.
Yeah, it's a total of $33,000 to remove the tree and do the concrete work. But nobody has mentioned about the concrete work yet because Public Works cannot do it.
I have a question. Steve, how many of these kinds of emergency sidewalk and driveway repairs due to borough trees do we have in the budget?
yeah, we have under tree maintenance, we have areas for stuff like that. I mean, it's not a lot of money, but it's there.
Okay. But as the year goes on, we may or may not have enough money as the year goes on. If we get a outbreaking of tree incursions into sidewalks and people decide they need to take them down and fix the sidewalk, is there anything we can do in the way of preventive maintenance on areas where trees are planted next to sidewalks to kind of get ahead of this and get an idea of how many might be vulnerable?
If you're asking me, I don't have an
No, I'm
answer for
asking
that.
Dawn.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, there is that, but it's going to take some time. I mean, it's not going to happen overnight, that's for sure.
Well, as you're going around doing your inspections, if you could note any places that we're likely to have people complaining about, I mean, don't provoke them to complain by all means.
No,
But,
I would.
if you can get an idea of, what is our exposure on this kind of thing? My tendency is to favor in favor of the tree and keep the tree and, adjust the other things if possible. But as in this case, apparently that wasn't the judicious result. But I am concerned that we have a bit of exposure in this area. I'd like to get an idea of, how much of a contingency are we facing if we have an outbreak of these kinds of repairs.
I will do that.
Thank you. Just as you happen to be, out and about
Right.
for things, if you can keep an inventory of ones that seem to be potentially in need of this kind of repair or attention down the road.
Sure.
Generally, there is some money in the budget now. Of course,
Yeah.
funds are limited. Once you start using it up, obviously, you know, you're going to run out of that extra money for things like this, but
Okay, I just wanted to mention that in Patty's 10-year comprehensive plan, she put together with assistance, it's really a great document. We are trying to feed the part that has to do with the kids, school crossings. And so far, Angelo, who is the public safety, he and his group has put together some sign activity that's been going on. I don't know, I haven't updated how many signs have gotten placed yet, but it's a program that is going to really help the neighborhood have more exposure to taking care of its kids. Wasn't much there before. So I just wanted to give an update that that section that's within our 10-year comprehensive plan, that we're going to continue to address that part, which Patty brought out in her section of the school crossings and the kids. That's all I have to say. Thank you. Are there any questions about anything?
the only thing I would want to add, I had put under committee business, not that it's something critical necessarily, but it started last month and you wanted me to remind you about it. The fact that you were discussing tree bids and whether or not we should require any bidders to have an arborist. I don't know if that was settled when Mr. Crusper was there at the meeting or not, and you were satisfied because you realized that we do consult with somebody in advance of doing bids. So regardless of whether the company has an arborist or not, that is taken care of. But I just want to ask, do you still need to discuss this further? Do you still want it on the agenda?
Any feelings on this, Patty? Jack?
No, I think we need to have an arborist at our disposal when we have tree services being provided, whether it's specifically noted in the bid or not. I think we need to have the services of an arborist at hand.
Well, we do, and we're
Yeah.
using Carl's.
Yeah,
And Joe, I forget his last name now, but Joe is a certified arborist, and we do usually consult with him.
Yeah.
In advance, and we do have some money budgeted for that. Although last year he really didn't spend any of the consulting money. He did all that essentially just as part of his normal work.
Yeah.
But that is something that Dawn does in advance of tree removal and pruning bids.
okay.
I think the impression had been that we just sent out a bid and asked people to cut down whatever trees they thought they needed to cut down. That's not what we do. You know, we give them a list based on what Tree and Shrub does, what says, and what the arborist that we use as a consultant says need to be addressed. So that's specific. It's not, so even if it's just me going out to cut down trees, I only have to cut down the ones that are on that list. I do not, engage any or have a need for any arborists to consult with because it's already done. So I'm going to just remove this then, but in the future, whenever bids always come up toward the end of the year, I guess that's something that you might want to discuss with Tree and Shrub over time to see if, what their recommendation might be, either Dawn or I think, Barb, you usually sit on a Tree and Shrub, I believe. Maybe you might want to have them address that and discuss that a little bit in advance. So, but I will remove this. That's all I have to mention.
Well, we're finished.
Okay,
Right.
we'll go to finance in a minute. I just need to finish typing this note. Okay, let me find my finance agenda here. And okay. This agenda is brief, but I do have something I want to show you in a PowerPoint because of some concerns I've raised over the last several months. We okay to start finance?
Yes,
committee?
please. Please, Mr.
Okay.
Morris.
Both things I have to talk about involve the budget. The first one is generally the 2022 budget and cash flow year to date. I did not give you a cash flow report. Instead, what I'm going to do is show you a PowerPoint presentation. The reason why I don't have one right now is because at the end of the year, we always go through a process to close out the year. And it doesn't usually happen the first week of the new year. It usually takes a few weeks because we need to get bank statements in, et cetera. So I don't have a cash flow for you, but I want to talk to you about this because I think it's critical and important. And it's something that everybody should be aware of, whether you're whether someone is on here or if they're not on, should pay attention to. So I'm going to show you this PowerPoint presentation, and I think you understand what I'm talking about here or why I'm concerned. If I can find what happened to my PowerPoint on this screen. Hold on one second. Okay, is that there? There it is. Okay. And everybody see my Finance Committee January 10th, 2003 screen?
Yes,
Yep.
we can see it.
Okay, great. All right, what I want to do is talk about a preliminary update on the final cash flow for 2022, as well as related to that budget preliminary report. But again, because 2022 accounts remain open, the final information may change, but I still think it's something serious to take a look at. This is really an overview of general fund numbers and cash flow numbers. If you remember 2022, I mentioned to you several months well, actually the last half of the year, that cash flow was underperforming compared to recent years and caused me some concern because I thought we were going to run a deficit. And we did run a deficit. So this report is an intent to emphasize the need for increased oversight and control of spending by council as a whole and not only the Finance Committee. I think one thing that sometimes people neglect to look at, if you're not on the Finance Committee, you don't pay attention to this stuff. And I think in the past, especially in the last year, there have been times when there might be decisions on other committees, for example, that impact finance, but they're not discussed as part of the budget. So I think really the key should be that my last point, finances really affect all borough operations and decisions can't be made without full consideration of council. There's two ways of looking at this deficit. First is the cash flow at year end, and it shows preliminarily, because it's not finished yet, a deficit of $88,761 in cash as of the end of December. This is the first time we've had a deficit here since 2010, I believe. Okay, the number, the reason why cash flow is a little bit iffy.
Can you hear that?
Hello? Is somebody trying to stop me? No?
No.
Okay, the reason why cash flow is a little bit iffy and not the best way to look at this is because the number I give you every month doesn't reflect any corrections that are made or changes that are made by staff. There are many times when staff accidentally enter something that should have gone to corrective action, for example, or should have been part of the fire fee, and they hit the wrong key and we don't pick it up until later on. We usually always pick it up, but we don't pick it up until later on. So the $88,000 deficit is just a guide. It's not something that's really something necessarily serious to pay attention to. More so, the budget information is more serious to pay attention to, because in the preliminary general fund budget final numbers for 12/31, I'm showing a deficit of $159,850.14. But again, this is the first time we've had a deficit in years. Now, I think it's important to explain why. I think it's also important to realize right up front that this is one of the things that can happen when people don't pay attention throughout the year, starting in January, to what's being spent and to whether or not there is funds available for a tree program or buying software or computer systems or, you know, what have you. Okay, if you're not paying attention to it, you run the risk of having a problem. I want to mention too, since we're live streaming this, in case anybody's watching this, this doesn't mean that the borough is in bad financial shape. It's not. It can cover this deficit without a problem, and none of the other funds.
Steve, can I please make a comment? If you
Go ahead.
add all our various funds budgets together, it's about $10 million. So So
Yeah.
100,000 is like 1%.
well,
it
I'm-
looks like it's probably, if I would blow my own personal budget by 160,000, it would be bad. But it's still bad, but it's 1.5% of our total budget. So it looks more dramatic than it is.
I'm getting
it is
it.
still dramatic, but
I was getting to that.
okay.
But let Mr. Market, let
Well,
Mr. Morris
okay,
finish,
okay.
please, so that we have the full picture
So
before.
in any case, overall, we do have funds to cover things, and none of the other budgets have a deficit. It's just the general fund. It's something that can be made up. But again, it's something that you have to pay attention to. Okay, when this kind of upsets me, because one of the main things I do is finance and budget. And but I can't control all this stuff because I need your attention. I need your backing to do this. I need your awareness to do this. And that's the reason why I think it's important that even though it may be 1/10 of the budget, it doesn't make any difference. It's something you still need to be aware of, because you keep doing this, you're going to have a problem. It can't happen over and over again. And I didn't like the way this thing was handled the whole year. Okay. The reason for this includes a number of things. Things that were generally okay and out of general control. For example, an increase in personnel costs, including salaries and benefits in police and public works. If you recall, you transferred several officers from part-time to full-time. That, of course, changed things like fringe benefits and healthcare benefits, things that we didn't necessarily budget for because part-time officers do not get them. Overtime costs for both departments were up. In particular with Public Works, we had various events they staffed. They had snow early in the year. And of course, leaf collection was a problem because we ended up not having our main truck that only required one driver. We had to use old equipment that required 5 people. Pension costs increased overall. That was also a problem. I'll talk more about that later because you may notice a number in the budget when you see it, and I'll make sure I state why that one is not an indicator of a problem. Miscellaneous expenses were up over budget by about $20,000. They included things like McMahon's sidewalk assessment and the complete street stuff. Some of that stuff was covered by a grant, but it was still up as an expense. And then as far as pension costs are concerned, they're up overall. But generally, one of the things you should be aware of that you'll see in the budget as both a revenue and an expenditure under miscellaneous sections in revenue and miscellaneous sections in expenditures, the number $491,000. That seems like an awful lot of money. It's way over budget. We don't usually budget much at all for that, if we budget anything at all. The point there is that's not a cause of the deficit. That's just a bookkeeping thing that we do and shows as both a revenue and an expenditure. So when you see that in your budget or in your financial statements that the treasurer gives you, that's not necessarily a problem. Some other issues. Pool, water, and sewage costs were up due to leakage and evaporation due to heat. Also use the spray park. Both were up by about $8,000 each. Legal costs, we had increased activity in planning and zoning related matters. So we were over budget there. And as everybody is experiencing, fuel costs are up for everybody. And of course, they're up for us as well. Now, with the pandemic, if you recall, we did get ARPA funds. The council's decision was to reserve those funds for other uses and not use them to repay the general fund. Over time in the last year, I did show you a chart that explained a calculation formula for how to determine how much our loss due to the pandemic may have been. And the ARPA funds were intended to possibly cover that loss. I attached that chart to your agenda. I'm not going to show it separately here, but that chart does show that we did lose because of the pandemic substantial amount of money, but we decided not to use ARPA funds for that. So of course, that also somewhat contributes to the fact that we have a deficit. In general fund revenues, there were several categories that were under budget. Real estate tax collection, lien costs, and refuse fees were under what we had anticipated. Now, there were other offset categories that were over budget, like earned income tax, the fuel fee, RAD, pool sponsorships, and MMO. So that helped to balance some of it out. But still, when you have something like this as part of your plan, that can be an issue that you have to deal with if you don't correct it, or if you don't pay attention to the bottom line every time you see the reports that the treasurer gives you. That's just a quick summary that I wanted to explain to you. You're going to see that when you get the budget that I'm working on to print. And it's something that I think is severe enough that we should talk about it, since it hasn't happened in years. Now, I don't know if you have any questions for me. I ran through that pretty fast, but I want to at least explain briefly the issues. Barb,
Barb,
Barb, you had a question.
Yes. Mr. Morris. Now, these may be small saving ideas, but could we perhaps start to look at perhaps behavior changing, specifically with, do people let vehicles run? Do they shut them off when they're not in them? Borough vehicles. The use of paper. I know it's nice to have paper reports, but I don't have any idea how much the cost is for this, but environmentally even, I would prefer just having the reports come in email. And I don't know if other council members have a different preference, but that could be some ways we could save money. Have we ever thought about, I don't know if you want to call them belt tightening, but that was something I wanted to throw out there.
You're right. We do try to scan as much stuff as we possibly can in and provide you with information that way rather than paper. Some of the stuff we have to put on paper. We have no choice.
yeah,
Like we have to print, for example, ordinances, and we have to have a book that has them. We're supposed to technically print minutes until they change that rule. We have to do that, and have a book that we maintain them, even though they also go electronically on our system. I know the only place I've ever seen trucks running, vehicles running much has been up here with the police sometimes. I'm not saying the public works never does it. I don't know. I haven't seen it a whole lot though with them, but that's something we could address. Also, that's not an issue.
Steve, I would like to add to Barb's concerns about efficiency, but I know some of the most significant changes that we've had in the last year's budget were the personnel issues that happened mid-year. And those are not likely to repeat, isn't that correct? And they've been reflected in this coming year's budget? Is
Well,
that
right? Yeah. I mean, let's say, for example, though, that you decide to hire 5 extra police officers, just to throw a number out, that's not what we budgeted for, but yet that may be something that's necessary considering some of the issues that we're dealing with police, just as one example. So that's not something that's in the budget. I don't anticipate any other issues though necessarily. And we were able to cover the salary increases and the various fringe benefit increases and things like that. And that's all part of the 2023 budget. So
Yeah.
that's all included there. There's always going to be something that you don't expect. The problem is that people need to be aware of that. And instead of saying, okay, we're spending an extra $20,000 or $30,000 on trees, but we're still going to buy, I don't know, this software for a computer system for $20,000. You have to maybe say the tree thing is an emergency. We have no choice. So we have a choice. Let's wait and hold off on buying the.
Well, I'm
Or
thinking,
what
things that I think we had grant funds for, weren't some of those things you had as miscellaneous expenses offset by grant funds?
A lot of grant funds are for capital items and they'd be in the capital budget more so than this, and the general fund budget. It just depends on that. But a lot of our grants tend to show as
Well,
things
the
that are
Complete
for
Streets
capital
grant was
spending.
for planning, and I was pretty sure that was covered.
Well,
from
it
the
may
grant.
have been. I don't remember exactly, but I'm
Yeah,
just
because you
saying.
mentioned specifically those two, the 10,000 and 5. I'm pretty sure they were both covered by the grants that we did obtain. And that were for planning. They weren't for bricks and mortar stuff. That's the one that's still pending with the DCED allocation for the Crazy Steps repairs. But those operational ones, planning ones, I think they were covered by grants. They should have been offset by revenue. So if you could
And
check
some
that
of the,
for me.
well, I
I would
mentioned that.
appreciate it.
I mentioned that with McMahon, some of
Yeah.
that stuff that was in general fund. If you look under grants, you'll see there's I think a $15,000 grant or something.
Yeah, that's
that
right.
shows. So I admit there are, there are some, just like with that pension number that I mentioned as an offset, there are other offsets too that show up. You don't always see a connection though,
Okay.
because you don't know, for example, that McMahon rather under miscellaneous revenue is being covered by a grant that's up in revenue. That's just the nature of
Okay.
budgeting, because you can't break every single thing out. If you did, you'd go crazy. You'd never be
Yeah.
able to
Well,
budget.
because I've been seeking grants. I mean, there's a lot of grant money floating around. I just spent all day on a seminar about grant availability for communities. And, you know, if it's going to just send our budget into a tizzy to get grants, I'm not going to do it. But I think
No.
there should be some things that we could cover with grants. And I want to make an effort to get some money into the town to cover things like the work we're doing on the energy efficiency upgrades and improvements. And also for some of the other stuff that we're doing in amenities in the community. So I'm hoping that we can get some grant funding in there. Marcus,
wouldn't-
you had your hand up a
Well,
moment ago.
I wouldn't stop getting grants.
Mhm.
Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry, Marcus.
Marcus had your hand up a minute ago.
No, I didn't.
Oh, I'm sorry. You were waving your hand.
Frank did.
Frank had his hand up.
Oh, did Frank have your hand up?
So a couple of questions for you, Steve. Number one, those numbers are based on where you're at by the end of November of this year, or is that the end of the
December.
fiscal
End of
year?
it's preliminary for the end of December, the end of the year.
Preliminary end of December?
Yeah, I mean, she hasn't quite finished all
All right.
the stuff for 2022, but
So
yeah.
does part of that deficit also include a couple of the part-time officers that were converted to full-time officers as well?
Right, that's what I mentioned in that PowerPoint, yes.
Okay, because those were kind of unplanned personnel moves that I believe all of council agreed was necessary in order to kind of prevent.
I don't
personnel
disagree
loss,
with you
right?
on that. I don't, you're right. My
Right.
point is that while that's happening in one place, somebody else in another committee has to see that and say, okay, we have to exceed this cost. That means maybe I can't get the thing I wanted right now. I may have to wait. And
Yeah,
that's what
I
is not
understand.
happening. That's what doesn't happen.
I understand that.
Okay,
I
so,
understand that.
yeah.
However, that being said, I'm just trying to kind of get my arms completely around the picture. So, I mean, fair to say that we had some unplanned personnel changes that are, personnel moves that needed to occur. And I'm just trying to get my arms around that. What percentage of that deficit would you say was related to those personnel moves? Because in my mind,
I'd
the
have to-
personnel moves are probably going to be the more expensive moves that we're making, right?
yeah, let me
I'm
see
just
if I
trying
can-
to understand where the crux of the issue is.
Okay, well, let me hold on one second. I'm just pulling up, because I went through this with expenses. For example, in police, okay, fringe benefits were $34,000 above budget. Health insurance was $90,000 above budget.
There you go.
FIC and Medicare was $19,000 above budget. Again, with the preliminary budget that we're talking about.
Right.
Now there would be other things that would offset that. And I'm not trying to say that there aren't.
No, that's okay. It's
Yeah.
it's important to get this out on the table, but I mean, from what I'm understanding here, the personnel moves accounted for about 130,000 of that, which you just ran through, correct?
Right.
All right. So
Let me use one example. We're talking about getting some software for different things.
Right.
Well, we budgeted $6,000 for the software and I'm seeing costs of 12. I
understand.
mean, so the decision is, do we do
And that
that right
discussion
now?
hasn't completed yet because we have, a number of things we're still exploring.
The
which I-
question is, do we do that right now or do we wait?
Right. understand that.
Or do you physically take the money from one place and put it in another?
Yeah.
Okay, there's a lot of ways of doing it. And you just want to get a handle on this now. You don't want to have this continuing year after year after year. You want to stop it now is what I'm.
Marcus,
And I
I'm
wanted to,
sorry, hey, can I finish my one
Yeah.
point though? So here's what I think might be helpful. And if you've presented this, so it's where I think maybe we fall down sometimes as a group, and I'll be the first to admit this, right? You decide that personnel moves need to be made for whatever reason, right? So in the case of like public works or police department, right? You kind of make a decision because one of the things that we're very well known for and respected for as a community is our attention to detail and service, right? So those type of decisions are made But where I think, at least personally, I'll speak for myself, where I fall down is that when we do make those decisions, you have an idea that there's going to be an impact. I don't know that you have it down to the dollar and cent, that impact from a projected standpoint for the remainder of the fiscal year, right? So if that makes sense. So in other words, you know, in the back of your mind that benefits will certainly go up, right? Salaries are definitely going to be impacted because there's going to be a transition from part-time to full-time status, right? Pension and the minimum municipal obligation on behalf of the borough is all going to increase as a result of that. I think where maybe it might be helpful, and if you've done it in the past, and maybe I'm just not paying attention to it close enough, but I think we need to be able to kind of see that in a forecasted manner where we can say, okay, here's the impact based on the decision. Here's where we should land approximately. It doesn't have to be down to the penny, but at least here's a projection of how this is going to impact budget long term. Because then that, I think, allows us to kind of make those adjustments as well. Does that sound fair?
I agree. The part of the problem though too is that many times what I find is people want things done like that.
I get it.
That it doesn't work like that, not in government. It's intentionally set up to be slow. That's when people talk about the framers of the Constitution and all that stuff, they intended it to be a pain. They intended it to be slow because they didn't want one person like a king, you know, running everything into the ground. So the same thing happens with something like a decision on police. I don't disagree with it. I think Chuck is right that we needed to do something, and you all needed to do something about that. But you know, the time to say maybe we need to do something is now. You know, there's a problem. Don't wait. You know.
Marcus, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate Frank's point. Like basically, we converted 2 part-time officers to full-time officers. One was actually to replace an officer who was supposed to retire. So it's not like that we recklessly went over budget. We didn't know that the part-time officer is getting healthy again, and or the officer who wanted to retire, that he changed his mind and he felt like he can come back. We don't know control. It was not our fault, and it was not our, you know, it won't happen every year. I mean, we did in the past, we did good. We had one bad year. And like you said, we didn't use our ARPA money for COVID-related things. We actually have it banked up. I think we have like, isn't like $600,000 we have in the bank sitting there. So I feel like we are not reckless as it sounds.
No
One's saying that.
Wait,
I don't think anybody's saying that we're being reckless. I think he's just calling our attention to it. But that being
I would like
said,
to.
hang on one second. Let me finish my thought, Patty, and I promise I'm going to yield the floor to the rest of you. I'm kind of thinking out loud here. I think one of the issues is, Stephen, that I think we need to just we need to have our hands wrapped around, okay, what's going to end up being the projected impact of some of these decisions, right? But it's also, I think, fair to say that in years to come, future councils, as well as this current one, are going to face unplanned events, right? Another major flood hits the community, et cetera, et cetera. I think we've got to kind of come up with some sort of a policy that addresses that long term as well, right? When do we dip into budget reserve, for instance, to kind of cover these unforeseen costs that we sometimes, our number one job is to kind of predict what we're going to run up against, right? You know, our job is to really not just pay the bills, but look 5 and 10 years out and kind of anticipate what we're going to hit. But sometimes we do get hit with these unanticipated issues, and we need to kind of have a policy to manage that.
I need to answer this. Okay.
Sure.
I agree with all that.
Yep.
Part of the problem too is, you know, we've talked about the fact that down the road, I'm not sure exact date yet, maybe next year, maybe this year, I'm going to be retiring. We'll have to talk about that.
Sure.
Okay. So I could honestly say to you that one of the problems is that you have the manager doing all kinds of garbage, like running cameras at the meetings, like going through plans and cleaning out the basement of the rec lodge, because we don't exactly have a huge staff to do all this stuff. You know, we have 3 people in the office plus me full time. Okay. And when you come down to doing all these kind of things that everybody wants to do, because it's all important, and I don't disagree that it's important, but you guys, lots of times, not just you, but even the residents out there that may be listening to this, if anybody happens to be paying attention, because, you know, for whatever reason, you know, there is a very big view of Forest Hills as being a borough that does an awful lot for its residents, provides an awful lot.
True.
But yet it's a shrinking community too. And it has a Mount Lebanon taste for, but yet a very small comparative community. You know, that's something that you have to be aware of. And you can't just assume that everything that you want to have done is going to get done, especially not if you expect it to be done this instant. And that I see as a problem. And I want to add too that I don't know why I'm pointing over here because you can't see what I'm pointing to, but anyway, I look at this as my job to let you know. And I've been trying to let people know over the last few months that there was a problem with cash flow. The problem then tends to be that I'm talking too much and I need to be quiet. And that's what's happened the last few years. So I try to give you a short version of something before, but now when I see this, I want to make sure I emphasize it. I want to make sure I tell you about it so that we stop it. I don't want somebody coming to me and saying, why didn't you tell us there was $159,000 short in the general fund? Why didn't you explain that to us? That's what I'm doing. That's what my intent is.
I need to put a little bit of a word in here. I'll get to you again in a minute, Marcus. I think, you know how when you have a legislative piece going forward, they attach a budget review to it. I think I would like to suggest that when we're making major changes in whatever committee, if it has a budget implication, it needs to come to finance and get a budget review. I think it's also important when we're looking at adding things or making advances that we see what is actually in the budget for the current year for that category of activity and see whether there is a way to meet the need that we have within that budget allocation. And if not, is there a way we can shuffle things around a bit so that we can do what we need to do, but understand it may compromise other things that we're doing? I think this is, you know, we need to take the budget that we've adopted seriously. And I know this year it's a very tight budget. I had many apprehensions, especially about the revenue side. I think it's, you know, reasonable, but I am worried about the revenue side because we have very little control over that and it isn't as robust as I would like to see it. Marcus.
I just want to point out, we have like numerous piggy banks sitting there. And Steve, if you add capital reserve, budget reserve, the building fund, ARPA, if you add it all up together, correct me if I'm wrong, it's more than $1 million. It may be almost $2 million.
I'm not saying, and I said that's true when I did this presentation here.
Okay.
That's definitely going on. The borough is not in sad financial shape, but you're not in sad financial shape if you pay attention to this stuff. If you don't pay attention to this one thing, you're going to end up with a problem because how do you make up the budget deficit, for example, for the new year? That means you're $159,000 in the hole. Where does the money come from? From one of those pots. So that means, for example, you take it from budget reserve. Now you have less than what your projection was for budget reserve.
Yes.
You can't look at, I, for example, disagree with whoever made the decision that we should put all that list on the agenda for every meeting, because to me, that shows people, if I'm looking at that list as a resident, that financial list of all the accounts and everything, I'm wondering why you haven't cut taxes. Okay. And there's a good reason why you haven't. All those things can be explained, but if somebody looks at them on the agenda, no one's explaining that to them. They're just seeing this. And what does that mean to them? You know, so this is what my point is. I'm trying to explain this one particular situation to make sure that you're aware. And because I feel a little bit frustrated that people aren't listening to me when I bring it up.
Right.
And
Ms. DeMarco, could I please say
Yes,
something?
please.
Thank you. Steve, don't forget, we're getting a grant for the Westinghouse Lodge basement in the amount of $75,000. And several people on council brought this up as one of the first things to do when I became the chair of borough property was to clean that out. Now we are. But let's not forget about that there is a grant coming in for that. The other issue I've heard mentioned a few times this evening is software. Yes, the initial cost of software is a lot of money. But what I hear a lot of people say that we should do is predict what's going to happen in the future. In the future, we are going to have key employees retiring. We don't have any way of knowing what anyone does. We know a general idea, but we're going to be losing a great brain knowledge. If you have software, it can help out with the transition. That's all I'm saying. But at one point, we need to look into getting it. For
I'm
that
just-
reason alone.
I'm just using that as an example. I'm not trying to accuse anybody
Yeah.
or anything as far as the basement of the rec lodge or anything. I'm just using that as an example. Okay. I mean, I'm an employee and I have right now 6 people on here that are all my bosses. And I have to, and well, I don't want to really go into this. I'd be happy to talk about this in exec session some other time. But I'm just using those things as an example. Source software is important, it's needed, but then you need a budget for it. You need to be aware of it. And if you're going to do it, you need to, you can't just say that it's an isolated thing that's not part of the budget. It's a cost. If you didn't put it in the budget, where are you getting the money from? Where are you taking it from? That's what I'm saying. The money that's coming for the lodge, that's great. That's a grant that's coming we didn't expect, but that doesn't impact this deficit. It's something that's there and it has to, but people, again, if I let this go and didn't say anything about it, then the next thing somebody else would come in and say, why didn't you tell us about this? You're irresponsible. So, I'm irresponsible either way, I guess. I don't know, but I wanted to make sure people were aware of this.
I don't think you're irresponsible. I don't think anyone else does on console.
I'm sorry, what?
I said, I don't think you're irresponsible, and I don't think anyone else on console does.
Well, I hope not. I'm trying not to be. I'm just saying though, I want to make sure that I'm showing you this, that I think this is important. I think you would want to know this and you want to know why. And that's,
Well, I
know.
think, one thing that can help is that, we have to use the tools we have at hand. And I think if all of us are conscious about what the cost is of things that we're planning to do and, look and see, is it in the budget? Is there a way we can get it to be covered with things that we're already doing? Is there a way we can be efficient by combining these and looking at the overall impact? I think we really are in better shape than it looks sometimes. But I think we do need to streamline and modernize and adopt the tools that will allow us to be more efficient going forward. I know scheduling maintenance can often be a lot less expensive than waiting till something breaks or blows up before you correct it. That's why I'm looking at, let's look at some preventive measures if we can, instead of waiting till something becomes a crisis, whether that be, costs that we're incurring because of things, proper pruning can maybe prevent a tree from falling on somebody's house. You know what I mean? Then we would have less of a cost than, doing massive repairs under duress, just as one example.
and the software that people are talking about is one good example of being able to be doing preventive maintenance on in different
Exactly.
ways too.
Exactly.
And I understand that. Again, I'm just using that as an example.
Yeah.
I could have picked anything else. I just happened to see
Yeah,
that.
the
recently.
timing of adopting that and the ramp up of it, the training of it, maybe we need to discuss all of that a little bit. But we have to keep moving forward, or we can't stay in a situation where we're doing things out of slips of paper in back pockets. Mr. Burley.
Yeah, software. I've been in that business for 35 years now. And believe me, it is a very valuable tool to have to utilize. As Barbara is saying, we can get a lot of things accomplished. We can have databases that are being very functional for us. I really think that that's something we should seriously look at for the future.
Thank you. Any other comments?
If I can just.
Yeah.
Yeah, if I could just add one thing, would that be okay?
Yes, please.
Oh, sure. Just to maybe close this out, I think Mr. Morris has made a very good point. And at this point, all we can do is acknowledge that, yes, we have to be aware that when we poke the balloon on one side, it's going to come out on the other. And I think that, like I said, I think his point is well taken. And I think all of us agree that that's a valid point. Where we may be doing now is getting lost in the weeds of trying to say, well, it's not as bad or it could be as bad. That's not the point being made tonight. The point is we need to be careful of these things. And I think we're all trying to be a bit more judicious and think about that. How we do it is getting in the weeds, and we don't want to do that this evening. But so that's my thoughts, and maybe I can wrap this up.
I have one more closing.
Okay, Marcus, one more.
Basically, I agree with you, Patty. It looks worse than it is. I'm like since 14 plus years on council, we never had a deficit and we never raised the taxes. So I think, like you said, it looks worse than it is. That's all I want to say. And we are responsible and we will fix it and we take it.
And I think the thing is, well-warned is well-armed, and we can go forward with, the knowledge that we have to be judicious in honoring the budget that we've adopted and understand that it is a tight budget. And if we're judicious and careful, I think we'll be fine. Okay. Is there anything else for the good of the order in this committee at this time?
Well, I wanted to add that I'm going to be working on printing the final budget document this month. I hope to get it to you by early February. Last year, it took us too long because we ended up doing all kinds of other stuff. So that's my priority right now, is to get that budget ready. We have to have a printed copy, and we also have to have it online. Unfortunately, that's one of the things we still have to use paper for.
Yeah.
But we're kind of required to do it. So that if somebody comes in and wants to see it, we can show it to them rather than to have them look online. So I'm going to be working on that, and it will be on both online and in paper.
Okay, thank you
That's
very
all I
much.
have. And I apologize if I wasn't trying to offend anybody.
No.
But I wanted to make sure you were aware of it.
Thank you. Thank
I'm
you very
done.
much. Will you let us have that PowerPoint, please? I would like to have a copy of that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I just have to remember to send it out. I'll try to do that
Well,
tomorrow.
just, send it electronically is fine. I just would like to go over it in a little more deliberate way. Thank you.
Okay.
That ends the Finance Committee report for this evening. Thank you very much.
Okay, I'm fine with starting committee of the whole, Mr.
I'm ready
Erlander.
whenever you are.
All I have is some reminders and things I just want to make sure I'm clear about. The first one I brought up last week was the ALUM conference. Registration is now available. So if anybody's interested, please contact office staff. Don't contact me. Please send it to Patty. I'm Patty.
And
I'm
that-
looking at Patty. I'm sorry. Send it to Annette or Ann or Allison. Three people start with A. I can't know why I can't remember that. But anyway, I right now I know the only one I know that might be going is Ms. DeMarco. I may go as well. Not sure yet, but regardless, just be aware of that. And then I put this list of delegates on here again, and Barb already corrected one of them for me in an email. I wanted to make sure this was still correct as far as the assignments that everybody had, because I keep this list with me in case anybody questions anything. And I had Barb down for environmental advisory, and she did mention it was Angelo who was the liaison. I just wanted you to take a glance at this and make sure there's no errors there. That's who I have as the people responsible for various committees or delegates to various boards. And you don't have to let me know now. You can let me know some other time if you want.
I think the EAC is the only one I agree, which is
Okay,
changed.
so I'll change it on my list.
So who is taking EAC?
Angelo.
Angelo.
Okay. If anybody sees anything, let me know. Then we got an update from Three Rivers Wet Weather, which came too late for last week's committee meetings. So I put it here for you to read. It just talks about the different things that Three Rivers Wet Weather is helping with, and the issue of flow monitoring and things like that. You can read that on your own. The last thing I have on here is a reminder, which I assume Mr. Corbel is going to get into, because he did draft an ordinance on it. And I attached it to committee of the whole. That's about the tax collector situation and making sure that you have an ordinance in place. And the draft that he gave me is attached to the agenda here. I don't have anything else to report.
I actually have some comments on that. So basically, I asked Janet Sullivan to, she contacted Jordan. Like at the moment, we pay our tax collector $15,000, and the plan is it's labor-intensive job. The plan is to outsource it to Jordan tax collection services, but that will cost us $11,000. And Janet asked all those questions. So Jordan will actually, during the busy tax season, actually have a employee sitting at our window to talk to residents. She asked like a bunch of different questions, and they said it's all included in the $11,000. So what we're going to do is the ordinance will basically advertise our tax collector will receive $4,000, and then we also will pay under expenses. We pay we pay Jordan directly the $11,000. It will change a little bit depending how many houses we have. So that's the idea. And I guess Steve will probably give us more details. But so the idea is we have a tax collector on paper who has to sign everything. And I think you have to go to a tax collector class, which is like 6 hours supposedly. So it's really more like a paper job. So I think actually $4,000 is actually quite nice salary for that. So I hope we have some people who would like to do it and run for it, because people have to sign petitions and all that stuff in March, I think. That's it, what I wanted to say about that.
So I'm done, and you can move on from there to Mr. Corbel if you want, unless somebody has something more for me.
Yeah, I don't have much to add here. I mean, the changes were very simple to the ordinance. Change the salary from 10,000 to 4,000 in 1-241.
I think we raised it.
What's that?
It was 15. We raised it for, I think that our old ordinance was, but for Janet, we actually increased it to 15.
Yeah. So, and then with respect to the cost and expenses, it added costs and expenses that we would reimburse for things like tax duplicates and postage, mileage, things of that nature. That's not going to be necessary because, as Marcus mentioned, Jordan will handle this on a flat rate. So I deleted all of that and just basically said costs and expenses associated with any tax collection entity deputized by the tax collector. Shouldn't be anything outside of that, but just as a catch-all in case there is something. And then there was a whole nother section, 1-243, about office furniture and supplies, which, although Jordan will probably have collection days, they will have collection days at the borough. We do have a window for them to sit at, et cetera. They usually bring their own computers, their own software. They don't really, need any of that. So I took all of that out. I did run this past Marcus. It is advertised for your voting meeting next week, only because it needs to be passed before February 14th, or it won't be in effect for this term that's coming up. We'll have to wait again for 4 years. So,
and February 14th, I think it's the deadline or the starting date. People can collect signatures for petitions. That's why it's
correct. First day of petitions is February 14th, and then it goes for 3 weeks.
Listen, is there any way we can assure that whoever runs for this position actually agrees to serve?
That's a good question.
I think the short answer is no. You can't force them to serve, but I think you all as elected officials should recruit somebody that wants to do the job, and you can talk to them about how important it is that they follow through. And quite frankly, Patty, I mean, I don't know how much that they will do, but the communities that I know that have this kind of arrangement, the tax collector does very little other than take phone calls during the course of the year with people that have complaints, and then the tax collector usually interfaces with Jordan. I know some communities where the tax collector goes to the collection days and just sort of glad hands or hands out hard candy to people that come, just that sort of thing. So I don't think that it's a heavy lift for somebody that is looking to get a little bit involved with the borough.
That's why I think our plan is Edgewood, by the way, has the same model. They do exactly the same thing. I think Braddock Hills also.
Mhm.
I think there are like 2 or 3 communities in Woodland Hills School District who do exactly that. So I think that's the way to do it, because Janet, she had to work at least on average 20 hours a week. So it's almost like a part-time job, like a proper part-time job.
That's a lot of hours for $15,000.
Do you have anything? Yeah, but you get money from the school district too.
You-
Do you have anything else to add?
I don't have anything else to add to this or anything else to report on tonight.
Okay. Next, I have, we talked about that before, and pretty much I would like to, we kind of practicing it since COVID, since we're all on Zoom. Like before in the past, we kind of had like musical chairs. We had a committee in our council chambers, 3 people went to the front, 4 people were in the audience, and we kind of switched back and forth every committee. Now on Zoom, we are all on the same platform, literally, and it's hard to even differentiate who is on committee and who is not, because I actually like it better because people are more engaged. And like Steve said, actually, it would be good for everyone to care about finance, even people who are not in the committee. So the idea is that we are making every committee like committee of the whole, but I still like the work of the chairpersons. So we would have committee of the whole, but we keep all of you as a chairs. You're still finance or property, you're still all that. You're still leading the discussion. So nothing really changes. I just would like to institutionalize what we're kind of practicing. So pretty much everything is under committee of the whole. And I think it will actually make us a little bit more efficient, because now we can actually kick, since everyone is officially part of that, let's say, board property or finance, we can kick things directly to the business meeting rather than, okay, now we have to go from, we buy a police car under public safety, it has to go to finance. Sometimes it has to go to committee of the whole before we put it on the agenda. So I think it will make us a little bit more efficient, but I don't want to change anything else. So we still have 2 committee meetings. Like the school district, they call it like agenda setting meeting. That's kind of what it is. So nothing really changes, except it's more like institutionalizing what we're practicing. So any comments?
I have one, please.
Yeah. Please.
At first, I wasn't sure how that could work, but after hearing you talk about it, I think it is a good idea. A lot of committees anyway, people sort of chime in and give their opinion. So maybe it is better. We'll all feel more responsible for all these different committees. So I agree with you.
I would also like to comment that in the committee process, sometimes it's helpful to have a little bit of amplification of issues. Like we had Mr. Montz come in and talk about the Three Rivers wet weather activities last time. I think we should make time in the committee, whatever structure it is, to have some in-depth explorations of things before we come to decisions about it, and have possibly people come in to talk to us if necessary about some issues, especially things that overlap multiple committees. I think it would be a good way to do that.
And you're right, like someone talking to finance committee is technically talking to all of us.
Yeah.
Since we're now on Zoom, it is really happening. But
Yeah.
we had actually, when we were like in person, sometimes people, if they were like lucky, they had their 3 committees were all on one day, they didn't even show up to the second committee day. Now I think we're practicing it like we are all there anyway. And I frankly, I did not even memorize who is on what committee, because I only care about the chairs. I think, Jack, you had a comment too, I think you wanted to make.
Yeah, I given this some thought. I think it makes sense. I think it is very important to retain the notion of committee chairs, because someone has to be responsible and deeply invested in a narrow set of issues, and that's the only way to do that. But I think it will work out fine to basically have everyone chiming in. We're still going to have a committee chair in control of those issues, and I think it should work out fine. I do like the idea that we maintain 2 nights and not combine it into one. I think that's just too much for everyone in an evening, and that would be a bad thing to do. Keeping it at 2 nights would be wise.
Yes, I don't want to change anything else. But Jack, you mentioned once, like you think we should have like a vice committee chair, because if someone of us is not able to attend, I actually never thought about it, but I like the idea. So I would like to pitch it to everyone. Pretty much every one of you guys would be a chair and a vice chair of one committee. So we have like 2 people. We have one as a backup
Yeah.
if one of us can't attend. So what do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I forgot about that idea. I think it would, because otherwise we're going to have a little bit of a free-for-all if you got 6 people with no one leading the particular committee.
And it will help at the business meeting too, because occasionally one of us is missing the business meeting, and then I always like have to find a volunteer who wants to run the committee. So if we have a vice chair, I think I like the idea. So every one of you guys would get a vice chair. So can I go around again? What do you think about that?
I thought you kind of already do that anyway, if somebody's not able to show, but if you wanted to set it up specifically like that, I'm fine with that.
Okay.
Now, we have 3 members of each committee, and right now, whoever is, like, if I were missing, I know there would either
Yes.
be Barb or.
But we wouldn't have 3 members of each committee anymore.
Right, right.
So that's why I think
You
a
only have
vice
2.
chair would be good.
Yeah.
Do
okay.
that. All right, we're going to do that. So Steve, basically all of you, it would be good if you can, hopefully it will match up. If you actually send me an independent email of the 2 committees you're currently just in brackets a member, which one of those you would be interested in being the vice chair. And I'll try to match it up. Hopefully it works out. We will see. So then I will basically appoint vice chairs. Okay, that's it. So the next point, we talked about, having a recreational director. And just to go back to Steve's budget concerns, I actually presented numbers to council in the executive session. It was more or less budget neutral. So I just want to make sure there were some rumors actually on outside public world that we're going to do that to save money. We're not saving money, but the idea is to create a new full-time with benefits position to get pretty much more bang for the buck. It's not to save money. And Steve and I, we interviewed 3 people, and 2 of them had like strong pool credentials, pool manager credentials. Since the position will actually work with Frank, our mayor, I also asked Frank to interview 2 of those candidates. So I would like to present to you guys the leading candidate. And my plan is I will follow up with everyone after tomorrow, what you think. And then we may have to have an executive session prior to Wednesday's business meeting, maybe not. I will figure that out. If all of you agree with us, then we're fine. So Steve, would you basically just an introduction quickly. So his name is Walt Riemer. He's currently the high school aquatics director, and he runs the club team of the Woodland Hills Aquatic Club, which is, high school coach is like a commitment December, January, February, kind of after late afternoon, and the club is like after 5. So his name is Walt. I think he's running the high school pool essentially for like 5+ years. But Steve, would you please make Walt a panelist so he can talk? So the idea is I want him to talk, and then you maybe can ask some questions depending how it goes.
He is on as a panelist. I'm not sure.
Walt, would you please introduce yourself? Thanks for joining us.
I don't see him there now, though.
Oh,
Walt, are you there?
he was a panelist. He's still a panelist. No, he's gone.
He's gone. I'm showing 2 attendees. I just promoted him to panelist. There he is.
Okay.
He's on.
Hi, Walt. Not sure if you heard my introduction. You're muted. Walt, you're muted.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now we can hear you.
My apologies. Hey, I apologize. I'm in a concrete dungeon of the pool. I just had a high school swim meet against Gateway, and I'm still at the pool. So I apologize for poor internet connection, but glad you all had me here.
So Walt, would you please introduce yourself to the members of council? Obviously only Steve, Frank, and I know you.
I certainly will. My name's Walt Reamer. I was a resident of Forest Hills for many years. My mom still lives in Forest Hills. I currently reside near Kennywood Park in West Mifflin. I was brought back to, was actually recruited by Woodland Hills, both high school as well as club, the swim club, to rejuvenate what was a dying club at the time. And so 4 years ago in 2019, I was brought on board to manage all of the aquatics in the district, as well as the club team for Woodland Hills Aquatics. So for the last 4 years, that's what my primary job has been. I'm also a business owner that, you know, as I've told Steve and Marcus, as well as the mayor, that that is something that I'm sort of giving up, you know, something it's contract work, but it's something that I really do enjoy what I'm doing here with around the water, the recreational side of things for the district itself. And so when this opportunity presented itself, I jumped in with both feet and felt it was a good fit for the district, for Forest Hills, and for the kids of the community. And so, you know, that's the main reason I put my hat into the ring.
I would like to add, I actually talked to Tim, what's his last name? Like the athletic director from the high school. I forgot his name. The athletic director.
Tim Boster.
Yeah, I talked to him and he was very enthusiastic about it because he thinks it's a win-win for the community, for Forest Hills, for Woodland Hills. And he actually said he wishes more, there would be more opportunities like this to kind of join resources like that. So he was very enthusiastic about it. So any members of council, do you have any questions for Walt? Anyone or?
So how would your time be divided between your duties at the school and your duties at the borough?
Most of my duties at the school are evening hours. For the most part, I get to, during the swim season, high school swim season starts in mid-November and ends in March. I usually get to the high school right around 2:30 to 3 o'clock every day for my high school practices. And then I usually leave here around 5:30, 6 o'clock, depending on whether I'm working Woodland Hills Aquatics. I have 8 qualified coaches at the swim team, so I do not have to work every single night, which is nice. But my days, for the most part, are open. So that's when I would be working the borough, weekends, what have you. So I'm pretty flexible. You know, no longer, my daughter's grown and gone at this point, and so, like I said, from the high school perspective, that is almost always nighttime hours that I have to do. But it's hours around the schedule with the swim team, the actual district itself, as far as the aquatics director's position is concerned. I do not have to be in the building for that unless it's a scheduled meeting that I control when those meetings are.
Frank, would you like to do some comments about the rec part?
Yeah, so Walt and I spent some time on the phone chatting about the events. I kind of gave him an overview of some of the events that we're doing currently. We talked about even expanding upon those events, kind of leveraging the pool a little bit more for some of these events as a way of marketing the pool. And, you know, he left me with a very comfortable feeling. I mean, at the end of the day, I know that Walt has a lot of experience in scheduling events because he runs them through the Woodland Hills Aquatic team. I mean, I know that you do a pretty there's a pretty significant sized event that you do at least 3-4 times a year where you're bringing in these, you know, various swim clubs from around the area, and that requires a lot of planning. I mean, at the end of the day, right, he already has the skill sets required to kind of do some of the event planning that we would be doing outside of the pool season, right? Including the light up night and the movies in the park and the concerts in the park. And I don't see much overlap between those events and kind of the swim events that he, you know, coordinates right now through Woodland Hills Aquatics. So, you know, I feel pretty comfortable about our conversation and the exchange. And yeah, I mean, I'm very comfortable with the whole process. So
And during his interview, I actually took some notes. Walt feels very strongly about teaching underprivileged kids how to swim. We don't have to rush it. We don't have to. I think we should find an easy way. People who can't afford swim lessons, because Walt gets kids when they're in high school. I think it's actually better to teach kids, even that if we can find an easy way who can't afford swim lessons for free, because I think it's a safety issue to teach, 6-7-year-old kids how to swim. And so I think it's a great idea, and we should look into it. I don't want to rush it, but that's one of the ideas I took notes. Like our website needs to be probably utilized. Do you want to say something?
For myself, it's an important thing. I don't care. I really don't care if a kid ever joins my swim team, to be quite honest with you. If I teach them the basic safety features of just being able to save themselves in the water, that's what's important. Not every kid's going to end up joining a swim team. We're in a unique situation in Forest Hills where we have the summer clubs, and luckily have a club team, USA Swimming Club team, that they can go to if they're interested. But between running Learn to Swim lessons year round, finding grants and different funding for the Learn to Swim program, Woodland Hills Aquatics, as an example, which is a 501c3 that I run, we go out and get funding, and then we offer, if they receive free or reduced lunches, we give free or reduced lessons based off of those certificates. And that allows the underprivileged the same opportunity to learn to swim in our communities, that in some cases they're not going to get because their parents don't have the money.
Good. Any other questions? Okay, so basically I will follow up with every one of you in a phone call, and if needed, we will have an executive session prior to the business meeting. If not, we will have a motion like we did in the past to authorize me and Steve Corbell to kind of start the contract negotiation with Walt. So any questions about the procedure? So the plan would be pretty much, we do the contract, you give us the authority on Wednesday, we do the contract, and then depending how it goes, Walt could be on our team February 1st or middle of February, something like that. So that would be the plan. And Cindy is 2 months, she's working for us until end of February, so we need to have a little overlap there too. Okay, that was the last point I had on the agenda. Anyone else has anything for Cal?
No, that sounds good.
All right, thank you, Walt, for joining us.
Question?
Yeah.
Not about this, about the fate of the newsletter. After Cindy, is she
No.
still going to run the Tree City
Yes.
Times under contract? Okay.
We did not touch the Tree City Times. Only her director position. She will keep doing, of course, long term, we have to think about what we want to do with that. But it has nothing to do with, she's still the editor. Even if we go online, we need an editor for that. So there's nothing about that changing. Okay, thank you everyone for joining us.